Our next guest, and I like to say VIP, Matthew Zachary. I met Matthew about 3 years ago at a conference, and one of the things I remember him saying to me, if you want to get young adults together, you got to do it outside of the cancer center. And so started our happy hours again with Tara. Where we meet every other month, and we usually meet outside of here. Drinks are optional. And if you're interested, please, we have an email list going at the Stupid Cancer table. So if you're interested, please sign up. And again, any questions that you would like to answer, we may not have time for, there is an email address. Please email the New Jersey Stupid Cancer chapter. I heard Matt took piano lessons about a week ago, Matt, right? So I'd like to see what you've learned in the meantime. So without further ado, you're going to hear a wonderful presentation, and I know be very inspired by Matthew. So thank you, Matt.
I'm just going to start with this.
Within the young adult cancer community,
we hold no one's disease above anyone else's.
It is not a contest about body parts.
and the playing field is level.
The playing field is leveled.
When stupid cancer,
Stupid cancer.
Stupid cancer.
When stupid cancer comes along.
there are no good cancers.
Benign tumors are just as devastating
Just as devastating.
Just as devastating.
as malignant ones.
Issues of isolation,
Fear, relationships,
Fertility,
Parenting.
caregiving, careers, and insurance are equally shared. We believe that when the doctor says, you're cured, go home, that is not.
Not the end of the story.
We have the right
the right
to survive with dignity,
and quality.
and we deserve
To be treated age appropriately.
Cancer survivorship is an art.
And the art of your survivorship is how you choose.
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 Choose to get busy living.
This is who we are.
This is who we are.
We are one. One.
We are one community.
We are hundreds.
Hundreds.
Hundreds of thousands strong.
We are changing the rules.
We are changing the rules.
We
are
Stupid Cancer.
So, first and foremost, I want to thank everyone, John Theurer, Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, Gilda's Club, the wellness community, the cancer support community, the Young Survival Coalition, Cancer and Careers. There is a wealth of amazing collaborative organizations working on everyone's behalf to ensure the mission that no one goes unaware of age-appropriate resources so you can get busy living. And Dr. Guan and I had dinner, like I said, a couple of weeks ago, and I meet a lot of people. He is an exceptional human being. And for those of you whose lives are saved by him, we're all blessed to have him in our lives. I have a similar doctor who saved my life, and I totally get it. I think this is a wonderful opportunity to come together. So I'm in awe. I really am when I come to these things. And I like the fact that he walked back and forth. I don't walk back and forth as much as he does. But I'm always in awe of these types of events because I come from you'll hear my story, but I spent most of my life in the advertising industry, in the Madison Avenue agency world. So I look at things like culturally, anthropologically, the way we behave, systematics, in the way populations adapt new behaviors, complicated, annoying stuff. And to see the tangible, practical, implemented shift of change that has happened in oncology for consumers, people like us, over the last 10 years is one of the most significant transformative cultural events of our time. And I think we lose sight of that because it's not all about the medicine anymore. Like you said, it's in our head. Well, mine was, but it's in our head. the way we think about cancer as a disease, the way we appreciate the life that is engendered as an impact of it hitting you and changing the way you interact with the universe, your family, your friends, your job, your spirituality. We're aware of these things now. These were foreign concepts even 10 years ago, maybe even 5 or 6 years ago. And the adaptation of the medical ecosystem to realize that this is relevant and purposeful to the way we can live an empowered life being affected by cancer is nothing short of miraculous. These things take decades to facilitate in culture, and it happened in less than a decade. So I think that we all take a step back, look up 30,000 feet in the sky, and realize that we're here today because of this progress. And it's hard to see on a day-to-day basis. Like, my kids are growing up and they look the same to me every day, but people that see them a month later, they're like, my God, they're giants. You don't see it. You only see it when you think bigger. So there's a great saying which is like, think globally, act locally. And I like to believe that we can all think globally and see the change that we can't really see. And today is a testament to that, so we can all own this moment. So I'm going to take just a few minutes. I only have like 45 minutes, which is cool. And I did have my first piano lesson last week, so I'm going to play you. I have the little red book, first grade red book. So anyway, so my story starts with this, and I want to raise your hand if you've ever had a speaker start with a slide of him naked as a baby. Anyway, I was born in '74. I'm a Brooklynite. I started playing piano when I was 11 years old, and it was like the coolest thing in the world. I came home one day, my mom had played when she was a young girl, and my dad bought her a piano again because it was like lost in the ether of the 60s. And she started playing again, and I came home and said, where do you put your fingers? And she said, over here. I said, okay, boom, you're getting lessons. So but anyway, by college, I was the big fish in the small pond. I was writing for musical theater. I was music directing. I was really the classical music accompanist. I was conducting. It was wonderful. And I realized, fortunately, that even at the age of 18 and 19, I really knew what I wanted to do in this world. I had my whole life ahead of me, and I knew exactly, to the envy of many of my friends who were like majoring in English or something like that. No offense to English majors. But in all honesty, like lit-ret. What kind of major is that? Anyway, so... I wanted to be this guy. If you don't know who he is, he's John Williams, and he wrote the soundtrack to a couple of really important movies. He was my hero, absolute hero. I had an aspiration to be him, and Billy Joel was my other idol, without whom I would not probably be the musician I was back then. In the spring of '95, I was your typical college junior. I had all these wonderful things going on. I was incubated, living in my own little time machine of 24 hours a day, no sleeping, no eating. And Binghamton, where I went to school upstate, was the first university in the country to have a Taco Bell on campus. So I credit that to fueling my capacities in 1994, 5, and 6. I actually envy this gentleman. His name is Jerry Goldsmith, the late Jerry Goldsmith. Jerry Goldsmith was the director of the USC Film School. They accepted like maybe 20 students a year for graduate studies, and 95% of the people who graduated with a master's in film composition went on to write for Hollywood and television. That was my aspiration, knowing that I was this big fish in the small pond, willing to be the tiny fish in the giant ocean for a couple of years. Jerry Goldsmith puts John Williams to shame because he wrote the soundtrack to over 400 films. Star Trek is unfortunately what he's most well known for. But it was the summer '95 where my life started to change. And I was working at the World Trade Center, which is, if anyone ever worked there or went there, miraculous building, a wonderful experience. But the elevators were run on plutonium. So you were rocketed up, and I started to have these crazy headaches. And by the time I got back to college, my left hand wasn't working very well. So I couldn't write. I actually was a total geek nerd. I had a laptop, so I couldn't type. And I went to the campus doctors, and I said, what's wrong with me? And if you know the answer, don't shout it out, Meg. I know. What did the campus doctors give me for my left hand not working? Robitussin. If any of you watch the Chris Rock specials, Robitussin cures everything like Windex from that My Big Fat Greek Wedding movie. Yes, it was, yeah, the DM, that mattered, made a difference. It didn't work. Anyway, so I went through this comedy of terrors for the next couple of months where I was continuously misdiagnosed with everything but what I actually had. And whenever I get to this part of the slide, people's heads just keep nodding. I was just talking to, I forget, was it, I forget. She was saying, brain tumor. So, yeah, Carolyn, who was diagnosed with everything but what she had, which was thyroid and leukemia and a brain tumor. So this is unfortunately common, and it's more common in young adults because campus doctors don't think about cancer when the 18-year-old comes to complain that one hand isn't working. It wasn't until the late fall of my penultimate semester at college that I finally had regular, normal brain tumor symptoms of fainting and dizziness and nausea and whatever. So I came home and I saw my doctor and he was like, Jesus Christ, what's going on with you? I said, well, I went to campus. I went to campus doctors and they misdiagnosed me. All right, well, now you're here and let's get you treated. And they finally realized that, I should probably have an MRI. So I did, and then this giant thing was found in my brain, which is really wonderful, actually, because I realized I wasn't really crazy. Because everyone's like, it's in your head. Well, it wasn't in my head, but psychosocial stuff, psychosomatic stuff. I had like this massive 8-hour surgery where you're just like completely unconscious off the grid, and it was a huge mess. And I had 2 questions. These are legitimate questions that I asked when I was in prep, which is that all I want to do is play piano. Because what the tumor had done was it eroded all the fine motor coordination in my left hand. Gone. So I couldn't play. I couldn't play piano. I had actually wound up switching hands, like in that movie Amadeus, to play the right way so I could just get my music done. But you're not really, that's not therapy. That's not a solution. So I also asked, where are the other young people? Because I was in prep in the craniotomy ward, or whatever they called it back then, and there was a bunch of old people, and nothing offensive to old people, but I really felt at a place. And we live in the bubble. We realize that this is our universe, but when you're just coming into it, we forget what it was like for us to not know anything and to have this be a whole new world that we were walking into. So they didn't answer either of my questions, needless to say. So clearly, I went through the typical acute side effects of brain tumor surgery, and they actually determined that it was malignant. It was a pediatric tumor called a medulloblastoma, and I was a freak of nature. This is a tumor that happens in children under the age of 8. And at the time, Sloan Kettering and NYU really didn't have any case studies of young adult medulloblastoma, so there was no off-the-shelf cookie-cutter, protocols for me, and I was born with it. So literally, this is a congenital tumor. There's no prevention. There's no risk reduction. There's no early detection. There's nothing. You just, boom, congratulations. And I had like crazy surgery, and I had this like Chernobyl level, dip you in the ocean and cover you in feathers and throw you in the oven kind of radiation. Big mess. I'm a walking petri dish of late effects. But at the end of the day, oh, by the way, total non sequitur. You know in the gift shops at airports, they have those 3-dimensional crystals with the images embedded in them? You're welcome, because I had the clinical trial stereotactic that fostered that consumer product. So, how do you think they get the dots in the crystals? It's stereotactic radiosurgery. But the isolation was torture. Again, there was really no attention back then paid to survivorship and quality of life, so I don't fault the system for being what it was. And it's one of those that would have been nice if. But these days, we shouldn't have to say would it have been nice if, because it should be, as a standard. I found this in a Reebok pump shoebox to date myself as a 38-year-old. This is my discharge paper from Sloan Kettering on March 30th, 1996, and I keep this forever and ever and ever. I will never shred this. I won't even scan it. I don't want it digitized, only in this slide. But the physical piece of paper still says the Reebok pump shoebox. I lost 110 pounds in 3 months. The Decadron puffed me up by like 80 pounds, but I lost like a net 30, and I dropped from 280 to 170, literally from February 14th to May 17th. The doctor's solution was basically to give me Haagen-Dazs. I ate 3 pints of vanilla Haagen-Dazs a day for 3 weeks, and I kept losing weight. really not good. And they said, oh, you got it to spare. I'm like, thanks so much. That's really wonderful to hear. I actually did go back to school and graduate on time because the school was able to bend over backwards and realize that, you know, any final senior semester is kind of candy for most people, and like didn't really need to do anything, so they let me come back and graduate, and it was wonderful. It was fantastic. But going back to the theme of today, what's next? So I went back to the doctors and said, I'm great, right? What do I do? It's like, no, you're not done yet. We want to give you your chemo. I was like, why? Because we want to save your life. I was like, okay. When am I going to die? And they said, you have a 50%, now that you've not died, you have a 50% chance to not die again for the next 5 years. And I was 22 at the time. I don't want to die 27 years old. So I looked at them and I said, well, if you give me the chemo, does that 50% number change at all? And they said, of course it changes. I said, to what? They said, 55%. Can I curse? Yeah. I said, go fuck yourself. I didn't really say that, but that's what I was thinking. But I literally walked out the door. I said to my parents, and by the way, I was a pediatric patient, but I was a young adult, and my parents were in their late 50s. The doctors were talking to my parents because they were pediatric doctors, not used to speaking to young adults. I think that's changed a lot, but literally, like they're talking about Mr. and Mrs. Greenswag, we'd like to, excuse me, I'm the patient over here, remember me? So I literally walked out of Sloan. I haven't been back since, and that was 17 and a half years ago. So, still here. But the music was gone. Bye-bye Miss American Pie was gone. I couldn't play. My right hand worked perfectly fine, but my left hand was a limp nubbin. Couldn't do anything with it. And all I wanted to do was reclaim that. Cancer really could not have possibly robbed me of that. So what did I do? I had nothing to do during the summer except hike the Grand Canyon when they said, don't leave your house. I said, okay, I'm leaving my house. I'm going to hike the Grand Canyon on a 2-week road trip with my best friend, Adam, who's still my best friend. He's in LA now. And that was it. I felt like if I'm going to die, I want to own some stuff. Before the bucket list was a phrase that was trendy, I had a bucket list. I wanted to hike the Grand Canyon. And that was it. So this was taken literally we had to jump like over this little ravine to stand on this thing. It was like a total like facing death moment for both of us. And we got some guy to take our picture that we knew was going to run away with the camera. But he didn't, which was good. So we got the picture. Anyway, so I actually got a job. And I'll just briefly talk you through like my social reintegration because this is really the what's next. And I had no peer support. You'd think a pianist would get like physical therapy to try and maybe help. Nothing happened. Nothing really happened. So then I started to realize that maybe I could play piano again. Maybe I could just really sit down and put something to this universe that could give me some sense of ownership. And then I realized that while I was going through all of this nightmarish ridiculousness, I actually wrote a lot of songs in my head. They were very angry songs with a lot of cursing in them, but I wrote a lot of wonderful motifs and themes. So literally, when I got this job, I took a lot of those ideas and I said, if I'm going to live my life and start over again, I want to have some piece of what was left of me, regardless of how much I've lost in terms of skill. It's still in here somewhere. So I wrote my very first song, official song. It was a hodgepodge of other ideas, and I called it Simplicity. And basically because I had to dumb down everything I ever knew about music. I'm writing for a full orchestra with 2 hands. And now all I have is one hand, some kind of version of a hand, and just a piano. So this particular song that I'll play for you right now came out of me in the summer of 1996. And it really was the watershed moment for me to realize that I could take some level of ownership over what happened. And while I may never be the guy that got to be John Williams, because I had to cancel my graduate school plans, which was the most horrible day of my life back then, there might be something to me still. So I present to you Simplicity. Thank you. Thank you. Back? Okay. It would appear. It took a while. It took 10 years to regain what I felt might be where I was at as an undergraduate. But then, of course, the good news was life got in the way. My life got in the way. And I started to rebuild myself. And I started to date again. And I started to meet people. And I started to believe that I could live. And it was impossible as an idea for a long time. And somehow being able to give these small concerts here and there from time to time really was what got me through the 90s. I mean, that and maybe Alanis Morissette. I do admit. So I actually wound up recording some albums for my own personal gain of that music. And I had written probably between 96 and 99, 30 or 40 songs on the piano. So I picked like the top 20 and I made these CDs. And again, I gave them out to nurses and social workers. In fact, Tomorrow's Children was one of the early adopters of my albums in like 2001. So you guys are sort of a part of who I've become. There's a lot of tangibility there. I actually threw myself an I'm Not Dead Yet 5-year cancerversary party. And that was when I realized I was going to live, even though I was still having MRIs every year. Even though my hair kind of never really grew back as awkwardly as it used to be. I had a crazy Jew fro, and I guess I don't miss it. But that was the year I met the woman who I would marry. And then everything changed. So my life since my 5-year remission, 13 years later, I got married. We had to do IVF. And then there were 2. And they keep getting bigger. So this was last week. And there'll be 3 on April 30th. Kobe and Hannah. And they're the reason I live. So I'm going to play another song, and then I'm going to give you guys a chance to choose my 3rd song. But my whole point is the what's next is never wine and roses. There's always a consequence, whether it's financial, emotional, religious. There's always a consequence to getting something disastrous thrown at you. And I was joking with some people before. It's not really a joke, but the secret to life, my dad says, is to clean up nice, make it look good, and never look under the hood. So I am plagued with a panoply, if I use an SAT word for the day, of wonderful chronic diseases that I must face. I actually had a stroke 2 years ago last week because the arteries in my brain are crumbling from late radiation effects. It's not a cardiovascular issue. It's called vasculopathy for the meds out there. But this is what I live. This is what I do. Make it look good. So my parting thoughts to any group are really to find your, like Julie did, and I love Julie. Julie actually sang at one of my concerts in 2005, a long time ago. We've come a long way. And you have to find your anchor. Everything that she articulated is gospel. You have to decide what your own fate's going to be based on the information you have, and to make as important and meaningful decisions that you can do at the time with minimal regret, and to get busy living every moment. Now, the reason I say don't take any shit from anyone is because Billy Joel ends every concert with that line. And I've seen him 20 times. And I can't wait for, not that I want the concert to end, but I can't wait for the end, for him to say, don't take any shit from anybody. And the crowd erupts in brilliance. So I'm going to play a song for you that I wrote, which is on my other album. By the way, I'm on iTunes, apparently. So you search my name on iTunes, you can find the music. You'll be the 4th and 5th people to buy it. But again, I didn't really do it for commercial gain. I just did it because I wanted to own something. The first song that I wrote that had nothing to do with cancer. It was a wonderful moment. I was just realizing that I had this great melody in my head, and I was really struggling to get this hand to start working better. And I was like, if I'm going to write something that has nothing to do with cancer, I wanted to show off the fact that my left hand works. And I don't play it as well as I used to, because when I wrote it, I was literally living in this bubble writing it. But it's called Autumn Drive, and it's the final track on Every Step of the Way, because I wanted to conclude sort of this prologue and epilogue with an amazing narrative about what it means. And then the third story, the third song, you can either hear, and I always know the answer, you could either hear a song I wrote for children affected by cancer, because I was a pediatric patient and I was really inspired by them. And I see that there's a lot more women in the room. So I know the answer to the other song is the song I wrote for my wife for our wedding. And I'm going to guess you're going to want that one. So I present to you Autumn Drive and Rediscovery. Do I have any time left? Okay. So I guess what changed for me was coming full circle to where I started speaking is this nature of change. And instead of becoming the pianist, the composer, I built a second life for myself because I had to. And yes, my dad said, get the hell out of my house and get a job, which I did. And I started out as the toner changer guy at a healthcare ad agency, ironically having clients that made drugs that I was on, which is they pull me back in, you can't get out. And I realized that this is my life plus cancer. This is just my life. And I've gone through this, and it's gonna be scary, and it's gonna suck, and I'll make the most of it, because I have no choice. And I had a mantra when I was literally under the blanket throwing up 6 times a day for months at a time. I was diagnosed like right as antiemetics started coming to market, and they were like $1,000 a pill, so I really didn't have much time to take advantage of not throwing up. But I had a mantra that I somehow eked out of my brain at that point, maybe the hole that was left if the tumor grew some microchips or something, which basically said that everything that happens to you, whether you like it or not, becomes a part of your life. And you have no choice but to live your life and be the best you can be every step of the way. Otherwise, you're not living. And that may sound like rhetoric and semantic and whatever, but that's what I ascribe to. That's what I believe got me through it. And my second life was built believing that. And the music was this anchor that got me through it. I didn't have any friends that that were watching, West Wing that I could annoy, because there was no West Wing in the 90s. There was like Full House or something. God, not talking about Joey on that one. So, Stamos, he's cute, but no, I'm totally dating myself, 90s. So I built this second life in advertising and marketing, and I got to reinvent myself. And that was kind of like the push that I needed, because it was a catalyst for me to help find some meaning and purpose in doing something else. And it was years before I met somebody that was another young adult survivor. So the thought of peer support was never even in my head. But when I first started to play piano again, and groups like HUMED and Tomorrow's Children's got my albums, I started to get invited to play at patient meetings and little tiny things. And I finally met, like 2001, 2002, patients who were diagnosed in college. I may have been 24 or 25 by then, but it was life-changing to realize that there was someone out there like me. And it's not a new concept to want to find somebody like you. If you like bass fishing, you want to be bass fishermen, that's fine. But when you've gone through something so traumatic at such a young age and you feel so isolated, it's like you get plucked out of the matrix, the aha moment. And that's exactly what that was for me. And being able to play piano again and reclaiming that was the catalyst that got me back into cancer advocacy. Because I started to meet patients and survivors and advocates and get involved with groups like Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, the Young Survivor Coalition, the National Coalition for Cancer Survivorship, the NCI, Consumer Liaisons Group. Really, really relevant stuff back then. And the word survivorship was just beginning to be a word, even though it was invented in 1986. It took 20 years for it to become a vernacular in cancer. And then meeting other young adults who were starting young adult organizations was fascinating to me. An organization just for someone like me. Wouldn't that have been nice if I were there? And then 2006 and 2007 were the year that the stats came out, the scary stats that young adults are kind of screwed. That there's been no improvement in morbidity, and mortality is increasing, and survival rates are terrible, and quality of life is the worst in any age group. These scary scaries. But that's kind of what convinced me I could probably do something that wasn't competitive, that wasn't built in a silo, that was going to be working with the system instead of working as competition to the system. And I'm Too Young for This was born in January 2007 as nothing more than a Yellow Pages website. Just a list of just young adult resources, hundreds of them that no one had ever put together before. What an idea. Let's put everything that belongs to here over here and make it fun. And that's all it was. And 6 months later, we were a Time Magazine Best 50 website for the year. We beat LinkedIn and Yelp for 2007. And it's me in my PJs in my bedroom. And here we are, 6.5 years later, as the nation's biggest advocate for young adults, working in collaboration with hundreds of organizations on a day-to-day basis, serving almost 3 million people a year. We almost crossed $1 million in revenue last year. And I have a staff of 4, and a consultant, amazing volunteer communities, and someone like Tara who came to the organization as this random attendee to one of our events, and now she's become a leader. And she created this. She built Northern New Jersey from scratch. And that's how it happens. That's what happens. We take ownership. We believe that we can do it, and it happens. And we don't let cancer get in our way. We just want to live our lives. And the takeaway for today is just that, progress and change. One day, I hope it's not remarkable for someone to do this, that it just happens because it should. We shouldn't have to have these things, but we need to have these things. And I couldn't be more humbled. And happy birthday, Maddie Beckett, our intern, colon cancer survivor. One of our interns. Diagnosed at 22 with colon cancer. It's Colon Cancer Awareness Month. We just did a show with Colon Cancer Alliance, and it's amazing to meet these young people. And like I said, watching the 10-year-old girl fight. I lost my brother-in-law at 19 to Ewing sarcoma. He was diagnosed at 15 when I met my wife, and I lived through that experience and watched him pass. So I'm not just the Hair Club president, I'm also a client. Anyone remember that? Yeah. That's an over 30 thing. But anyway, I don't want to ramble on. I'm so proud of everything that's going on in this culture today. That's just raising awareness, not just that young adults can and do get cancer, and that we're not special, but we're different, and we have unique needs that are finally starting to be served on a practical, tangible level. We're not just yelling on a soapbox, complaining about stuff. The kvetching is over. It's about real progress. Jews, kvetching, okay. And it's just a good time. It's never a good time to get cancer, but I mean, it's a good time to know that things are working in our favor now. And behind every door is 30 more, and it's never going to change. But as long as we know the doors are there, we can get through them at some point. So with that, I want to just end with my pre-story, because it's hysterical now. But after I was diagnosed, I had an 8-hour neurosurgical craniotomy. Say that 10 times fast. And I awoke at 3 in the morning, recently extubated in my sleep on a morphine drip, plugged into like a heart, lung, and liver machines, because they really take you off the grid when they go into your brain with an ice cream scoop. Everything today is like, what I had back then is laparoscopic today, which again is amazing, but like liposuction of the brain. And actually it's not anything like liposuction of the brain. So anyway, I woke at 3 in the morning in this dimly lit neuro ICU room. It was like a film noir with the dimly lit exit sign behind the curtain, like flickering practically, like in a Frank Mills graphic novel. And I looked up, I opened my eyes, and it's a priest, literally a priest, standing at the end of the bed with a Bible. And I said, I'm Jewish. And he left. I probably could have used all the help I could have needed, but anyway, so that was my first day as a cancer survivor. Today's my 7,000th day as a cancer survivor. It's just remarkable to be here. I'm proud to be here. So thank you for everything. God bless you all.
Thank you, Matt, very much. Number one, for helping us be inspired, but also helping us feel united today. So thank you. And yes, we can have lunch now.